All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible facts about you. Your brain is not static. It has this amazing ability to change and rewire itself throughout your entire life. It's a power called neuroplasticity, and once you understand it, it can literally change how you think about learning, healing, and, well, everything. So let's start with this idea right here, because it completely shatters a myth that stood for over a century. For the longest time, we thought our brains were basically hardwired by the time we were adults. But that's just not true. Your brain is a dynamic, living network, constantly remodeling itself with every single thing you experience. So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the big picture of neuroplasticity, then look at how it works when we're young versus when we're adults. Then we'll get into a really practical recipe for making changes happen. And finally, we'll explore its jaw-dropping potential for recovery from injury. Okay, first up, to really get what neuroplasticity is all about, you've got to understand the old way of thinking and just how different it is from the amazing reality we now know. Think of it like this. The old view saw the brain as a fixed circuit board, Once it was printed, that's what you got. But the new view, it sees the brain as this incredible living garden. Pathways are always being pruned back, new ones are sprouting, and some are getting stronger, all based on what you do, what you think, and what you feel. And the scale of this change is just astronomical. Your brain has something like 150 trillion connections, or synapses. And every single second, it's making decisions about which ones to strengthen and which ones to weaken. The amount of activity happening up there is just mind-boggling. So, how does this incredible network get built in the first place? Well, during our most formative years, from birth to about age 25, the brain is in this state of what you could call hyperplasticity. It's basically a giant sponge for experience. And that leads to a really crucial question, doesn't it? If every little experience is wiring the brain, what kind of experiences build the best, most resilient foundation for the rest of our lives? Turns out, our brains evolved to learn from the real world. Think about a toddler learning to walk on bumpy, uneven grass versus a perfectly flat floor. Real experiences are messy, they're unpredictable, and they engage all our senses at once. A lot of artificial experiences, on the other hand, are way too simple and disconnected. They just don't give the brain the rich data it needs to build a really strong network. And that's the bottom line, really. Our brains are designed to learn by doing. Just passively watching something or hearing sounds from another language, it just doesn't wire things in very well. It's the active part, the trying, the failing, the adjusting, that really makes learning stick. Okay, but what happens after that amazing learning window of our youth closes? Can an adult brain still make big, profound changes? The answer is a huge, resounding yes. But the rules of the game have changed. See, we're not that passive sponge anymore, soaking everything up. But the ability to change is absolutely still there. It just becomes a much more deliberate, much more intentional process. We actually have to create the right conditions to signal to our brain that, hey, it's time to rewire something. I mean, with those 150 trillion connections, this is the real challenge, right? How in the world does the brain pinpoint the exact tiny circuit that needs to be updated out of that massive, massive network? Well, the answer is pretty cool. It comes down to these things called neuromodulators. Think of chemicals like dopamine and acetylcholine as the brain's chemical highlighters. When you're super focused or struggling or you finally succeed at something, these chemicals get released and they flag that specific neural activity, basically screaming to the system, hey, this is important, save this change. So how can we actually put this knowledge to use? Well, there's a practical recipe, a framework for intentionally driving this plasticity in your own brain. It really boils down to this 4-step process. First, you need intense focus on what you're doing. Second, there has to be deliberate effort, that feeling of a productive struggle. Third, and this is key, you need to actively reflect afterward. Think about what worked and what didn't. And finally, deep sleep. That's when a lot of the actual rewiring and cementing of the learning takes place. It doesn't matter if you're learning an instrument or a new language, these 4 steps are the magic formula. And this is so crucial because it shows that learning isn't just about the time you spend practicing. The mental work you do after the activity, rehearsing it in your mind, thinking it over, is just as important for wiring in that new skill. All right, now let's look at what might be the most extraordinary application of these principles. using neuroplasticity to literally help the brain heal itself after an injury. So, when the brain gets injured, say from a stroke, the communication pathways that control our movements or speech can get broken, and this can leave people with really severe, long-lasting disabilities. But here's the hope. Because of neuroplasticity, it's not a dead end. The brain can actually forge brand new routes. It can create detours that go around the damaged areas to bring back lost function. It's just incredible. And now, technology can give the brain a precise helping hand. There's this groundbreaking therapy called vagus nerve stimulation, or VNS. It uses a tiny device to deliver a brief, perfectly timed pulse to a major nerve right as a patient is trying to do a therapy task, like moving their hand. What this does is essentially hack the brain's learning system. That little pulse triggers the release of those key neuromodulators we talked about, telling the brain, hey, that movement you just did, that's the one. It's super important. Strengthen this new connection right now. It's like a GPS for the rewiring process. And this just leaves us with a final, really inspiring thought. The science of neuroplasticity shows us that meaningful change is always possible. And if we can intentionally guide the brain to heal itself, it makes you wonder, what other human potentials are we just now finally beginning to unlock?